Hello, everybody. Today I have a wonderful expert I've been dying to get on to our show here for the longest time. I have Tracy Donegan. Tracy Donegan is a doula, a midwife, and a light biology expert, which is a laser therapy expert. And I've been dying to get her on the show because we work similar fields. She does a lot of fertility work and she's very invested and very fascinated with light laser therapy, PBM as it's also called, photobiomodulation therapy. She's an author multiple times, have written 6 books, including, let me see if I have some of those books in front of me here. We have The Mindful Pregnancy, Gentle Birth, Mindful Breastfeeding, The Irish Cesarean, and Irish Better Birth Book. Fantastic. These are some amazing titles. But what really interested me most was this current book I'm just finished reading, Red Light Therapy for Fertility. As you know, as a fertility acupuncturist, I've been using laser therapy for over 10 years in my practice. I've used various different ones, and finally I've settled on the Giga laser, which is a very powerful laser. And I invited Tracy on today to discuss the ones that she likes, therapies, and just overall how fertility can be improved by light therapy. So, Tracy, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Jim, thank you so much for inviting me. And it's it's been a challenge, hasn't it? Schedules the last we're into 2026 now, and as I was saying, it has literally been raining babies. I've just been back to back births, so we've had to reschedule a couple of times, but we made it.
Great reasons. Great reasons. I'm
Yeah, no,
happy.
exactly.
I'm
Yeah,
happy.
there's no better reason, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, thank you for making the time. I truly appreciate it.
Well, look, this is one of my favorite topics to talk about. So you may have to cut me off at times because it's just such an exciting area of medicine. And specifically, I think for women's health, because women's health has been ignored long enough, and we need to kind of literally put the spotlight back on women's health in a safe way and in a way that's going to, hopefully improve health, fertility, all that good stuff.
That's great. One baby at a time.
Hmm.
Excellent. Well, so why don't you start off? So tell us about your background. So how did you get involved? How did you get started? And then what brought you to lasers?
So, as you can probably tell, I'm living in Texas, but I'm not a local. I grew up in Ireland, and I kind of my work in kind of the fertility area was kind of twofold. Working as a birth doula, so that's a trained professional that supports parents that are going through the birth process, so helping them prepare for birth, helping them navigate their options. So generally what I tend to do is I go all in when I'm focused in a particular area. So after a couple of years of doula work, I wanted more. And I figured, well, the doula work there's a lot of the emotional support that you're providing parents is huge, but I wanted to understand more the clinical end of things. So at the in my late 30s, I decided I was going to go back to school. So I went back to university and did my midwifery in Ireland. And so I spent 4 years doing my midwifery and absolutely loved it. And our family had kind of traveled around. We'd lived in the States for a few years. We had been out in Singapore, then back to Ireland, and we had one little boy at that point, and we decided that we wanted to add to our family, and it wasn't happening. And we thought, well, okay, maybe it's just timing. Maybe it's, we started to get really more invested in understanding fertility, and it turned out that I had early menopause, which my mom had forgotten to mention. And I have a younger sister as well. So I thought, well, my younger sister obviously needs to know this information as well. So I had like ridiculously high FSH. It was quite a shock because they were like, your cycles are irregular or kind of stopped because you're now menopausal. And I had really had no symptoms really. I was, that touch wood because a lot of women suffer quite a lot with menopause. So really my only option was suggested was donor eggs. So I thought it was, and this is now 15 years ago. I had just started in my midwifery. I thought this is the timing is not right. We're just going to kind of park it. Let's finish my training and we'll see where things go. So we kind of, as you understand in this business, we dropped the resistance, dropped the trying, and I just focused on school and then found myself pregnant. 7 years later, but it was happening, and it was, yeah, unexpected and a fabulous surprise. So when I did my midwifery, we ended up returning back to the US because I had a an app that I had developed called Gentle Birth, that you mentioned the book that goes along with it, to help women get rid of a lot of the fear around labor and birth, because the brain has such an influence on how we perceive pain. And so that's where mindfulness came into it. And women were just having really positive experiences, no matter what kind of birth they ended up with. So it wasn't about, it was absolutely unmedicated or with an epidural. It was, I wanted women to have a good experience as they defined it and nobody else. So it was mindfulness training, hypnobirthing, and a lot of mindset and sports psychology. So the app was really successful, and a lot of the women that I work with today, I always make sure they're using the app because it makes my job easier as well, because they're confident, the partners are more competent, and they're able to cope with like the twists and turns that labor can sometimes take, without ending up with birth trauma. So, but over the years, so I developed that program back in 2006. And over the years, I've had what I call my gentle birth moms come back to me and say, I really wish there was a program like Gentle Birth for fertility, because we've had experiencing secondary infertility. It's been years. We don't know what's going on. We're about to start testing now, which is not happening. So then I got to work on another app that we developed. My husband kind of takes care of the tech end of things, and I developed the content, called Fertile Mind. And it's a mindfulness based app that focuses on, it's not about tracking cycles, or which some people I think don't read the description, and they message me saying there's no, well, what am I doing with this? But it's like little bite-sized videos and meditations that are specifically focused around fertility challenges and the emotion regulation that we really need, that none of us are taught in school, on how to manage our mind when you're faced with a very challenging situation like fertility or infertility. So that was kind of where I started really with fertility work. And then just a couple of years ago, um, I was kind of, and I know you've been using lasers for longer than I have, but it was only for me, about 3 or 4 years ago when I started to see the biohackers talking about red light, and I thought, okay, I'm just kind of keeping my eye on this spot, and we'll see where it goes. And I was seeing more and more quite impressive results in the studies. And then somebody mentioned to me, oh, red light therapy, that's energy medicine. And when I heard that, that was kind of a turn off for me, because I've always kind of pride myself on focusing on the evidence, and how can we translate the evidence into real life if we can. And but it was this when I thought, oh, energy medicine, I stay away from woo. I just don't do it. And I like, so for me that was that kind of put me off, so I kind of left it alone for a little bit, and then I was seeing more and more, so I thought, as most people do, what is it with these panels? I got to get a panel. So, like, probably some of your viewers, your listeners will be thinking the same. I'm in the market for a panel. What do I get? And I was bedazzled by the claims, and I thought, well, there's something to this, but I hadn't really drilled down into the details enough to see that so much of the research was based on laser and not LEDs. which function differently. So I got a red light panel, and I was quite religious about using it. And did I experience any big changes, or I don't think so. No, but I didn't have any chronic health issues either. But I have it's now. I think I turned it on last week for a little bit. That's the first time I've used it now in probably a couple of months, because I think when you first start looking at light therapy and red light therapy, I kind of I started looking at, well, okay, so these narrow bandwidths of light are so good for us. Well, can't we just get that for free? Like, shouldn't we just maybe be outdoors more? And I kind of came like from another angle. I was like, look at this. And as I started to read more of the fertility, yeah, studies, it was like, oh yeah, there's certain wavelengths that are going to really make a difference to women, but they need the sun as well. We've got to get them outdoors as well. So I think if anyone's thinking of, I can bypass the biology and just get myself a panel or a laser or whatever. I'm like, please get some sunlight as well. And of course, depending on kind of your latitude, where you're living in the world, if you're living in New York, getting
In January, it's
decent,
kind of a challenge. Yes.
it is. I am very, very blessed to be in just north of Austin, where we can get, vitamin D, UV light throughout the year. So I wanted to kind of take some training and see, where this was going. So I took a training with PTI, the Photonic Therapy Institute, and that was a really good kind of grounding for me to learn about the basics of how our biology interacts with these different wavelengths. But there wasn't a focus on laser, so I ended up, and what I was seeing in the research was that laser seemed to be getting the results rather than LEDs. I think we're still seeing some changes now, especially LEDs that are actually in skin contact compared to just sitting under a panel. Um, so I decided to invest in a laser, and we had a couple of home lasers. And one of the areas that really surprised me when we started using a home laser was because we didn't have any wounds at the time or significant injuries that would go, oh, we're gonna, because as you probably do, you experiment on yourself first a
Yeah.
lot. I'm like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
want to make, does it work? How is it working?
Hmm.
But we use it on our dogs. And that really kind of piqued my, I was like, okay, if it's doing this for, like, our dog had to have had one of her eyes removed, and she had all these issues with her ears getting, I think it was from roughhousing with our other dog. She would end up with a hematoma in her ear. So hematoma means you've got this pocket of blood that forms, really painful. And we'd already spent a small fortune on having surgery done on the other ear. So I was like, oh, now we're going to go back to the vet, and I'm like, the other dog's going to have to get a job to pay for all of these surgeries for
The
these
work.
vets. But we had a home laser, a small laser at home that we used, and could not believe the difference in, like, we could literally watch the hematoma like shrink in front of us.
Mm.
So my again midwife brain automatically went to, well, if it works on the dog, that has got to work for women who've just have had given birth. We had swelling of the tissues. I'm like, okay, this now we're now we're getting somewhere. So I started using. I took another class. Then the only university accredited training you can do at the moment is through the University of Montpellier in France. So I decided, okay, I need a credential that is a little bit more credible, really, and a little, and it's, and there's, from an institution. So unfortunately, the class itself is taught in French, and but they have a translator for a lot of it. And like, I'm going back to my high school French, and then they all the documents and everything were in French as well. So it was quite the interesting course that I took, but it was so thorough. and I got to engage with some of like the top brains in PBM, including Moscovin, who is the Russian guy who's been doing this since I think like the 70s. Like Russia has been at this and the
Yes.
Japanese for forever. So which makes it even more frustrating why it's taking the West so long to literally get with the program. But now, like I just I'm amazed every like literally week by week by what these tools can do. And I have yet to come across a condition that it will not help. And that's the magic of it. It is you could yeah like there's really there's nothing. I'm like and every like the new study comes out, especially when it's fertility or birth related or menopausal related. I'm like, I bet there's a way PBM could help this, because what we're looking at, a population these days that has huge levels of inflammation. They're not getting any daylight. They're all sitting under these artificial lights after dark, which is playing havoc with our metabolism. So it's no wonder we are not our fittest
Mm.
at the moment, and why
Yep.
children are now sitting in front of devices. They're under like blue lights at nighttime, which just, puts the brakes on melatonin, which is such an important antioxidant, and the body cannot go into that repair if we don't have that melatonin and all of that work that has to happen, behind the scenes at night.
Mm. Mm.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of where I started. So it's
That's amazing how you started at the tail end delivering babies and you wound up going back to the beginning of helping them conceive in the first place.
And
So,
I've very recently just had a client who I've literally done full cycle with her, from helping her, they were having some fertility struggles for about a year, and then to being at her baby's birth. So that was incredibly special. Yeah, it's
that's wonderful. That's very rewarding. That really is very rewarding when you
oh, absolutely.
get to be there. That's interesting because I also, I work as a fertility acupuncturist. We help them, clean up everything, diet, lifestyle, nutrition. We get, reduce stress, we get blood flow, we do the laser. And then when they do become pregnant, I continue to treat throughout the entire pregnancy up until labor and delivery. So I'm not there in the room with them when they're delivering, but I have turned babies breech
Mm.
with acupuncture and moxibustion,
Yeah.
and we were able to induce. So oftentimes I'll induce a labor that's overdue, or they want to avoid a C-section. So let's get things rolling. So yeah, it's wonderful to see full circle from beginning to the new beginning. Yeah,
It really is. It is. And it's so rewarding. I will say to you, if you ever decide to do acupuncture in labor, on call is no fun.
oh, I can imagine.
When it's especially if you've had the experience that I've had the last 2 weeks, where it's literally
Yes.
I come off one birth and I get home for a couple of hours sleep and I'm off to the next one. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But again, it's the work we chose, so that's great.
And I wouldn't have it any other way. I've done the
Yeah, yeah.
corporate gig, and yeah, you just when you find your passion and work that is really meaningful, it's the saying that when you find work you love, you never work a day in your life.
Oh,
Yeah,
exactly,
you just
exactly.
work 24 hours a day, but that's a whole other conversation to have.
Right, right. But it's worth it. It's worth
Yeah.
it. So I would love to touch base on a couple of points that you've made. I'd like to backtrack just a little bit. So for people who are watching this for the first time or who are new to PBM, just give us a very quick overview of how you feel the mechanism of action works. Like, what is the laser doing?
So ultimately, I always think of we have these little solar panels in every cell in the body, and they are what we call kind of photoacceptors or receptors. And they are buried deep in the body and even in the brain, which I think is fascinating because we used to think that, oh, light doesn't get into the brain. But we know now it does, and that's why the body has these photoacceptors that, being out in sunlight in particular is so helpful for the body, for our metabolism and general health. But most of us stay indoors. So for most of our day, or we're under this kind of lighting at night. So So if every cell has these receptors, different receptors will respond differently depending on the wavelength. So when we look at fertility and we're looking at wavelengths kind of from when we look at depth, near infrared, 808 to about 830, 850, we know are penetrating the deepest, that near infrared. So what happens is our cells that are really starved for this near infrared light, because again, if you're trying to have a baby and you are indoors 99% of the time, your body is just starved of that near infrared light. And that near infrared light and that light, when it penetrates the cells, it's absorbed by a molecular structure called cytochrome C oxidase. And once that is absorbed, then it kicks off a whole process within our mitochondria. The mitochondria, as we all know, is powerhouse of the cell.
Powerhouse of the
Like
cell. Yeah, biology
tattooed on you
101.
after high school. So it just helps the body work better. So if on one hand, your body is starved of this light, and now we're giving it the light, it will help modulate the immune system. It reduces oxidative stress, and oxidative stress, it's a byproduct of we've got too many free radicals and not enough kind of what I call like little fire extinguishers to keep the body in check. So for anyone who's doing fertility treatment, especially if you're for IVF, it generates quite a lot of oxidative stress in the body. So even if if you think, no, my eggs are perfect and I'm pretty sure my lining is great, we still have that oxidative stress in the body. And I think even if you're just doing light for that alone, just to reduce that oxidative and increase your chances that we can do this the first time and we don't have to go back for multiple rounds, because there's not just costs involved, but it's the emotional cost that's involved as well, and mental cost. So once the body absorbs it's kicking off this cascade, and depending on the dosage that we're using, the wavelength that we're using, it will have different effects on the body. So for like one area that I really love to work with is people that come in with pain issues. So frozen shoulder, really kind of standard musculoskeletal thing that you could be going to PT for 12 weeks to get resolved. Now, I always suggest they are definitely seeing a physical therapist as well. That is not my expertise, but they come in with a frozen shoulder and literally 10 minutes with the laser, and their mobility is increased, their pain has gone down, because especially when we're using a high power laser, we want to be careful with the class 4, because we've got to protect our eyes. We got to make sure the laser keeps moving so that we're not causing thermal, because photobiomodulation is not a thermal treatment. We are again activating the cells to do what they should be doing anyway. But what happens with the high intensity laser is that it creates what they call a rosary formation. So if you're familiar with rosary beads, you get these little beads. So the laser creates these beads in the nerves, which slows down pain transmission. So, and these days I am like, bring the skeptics to me. Because the more skeptical they are, they're like, oh, come on, let me show you how this is done. Because I might maybe 3 or 4 sessions at the most for a musculoskeletal thing, depending on what's going on. Neuropathy, like if you're like a diabetic neuropathy, like in the feet, and that takes a lot longer, and it's low dose. But like it is amazing to see, somebody walk in like that can barely move, to call me that night going, honestly, like I didn't have to take any pills tonight. I can move my shoulder. It feels great. I'll tell you how tomorrow goes. And usually the next day they're still doing better, and we come in for 1 or 2 more. I don't want them. I don't want to see them for 12 weeks. If it's not working, if we're not seeing significant improvement, and it's like with my fertility clients as well, if we're not seeing changes, objective markers that are changing, then we've got to change the protocol. This is not a one size fits all. If we're not seeing changes, then let's kind of look at everything else again. And like you, like I go through, like we talk about diet and exercise. They get the Fertile Mind app as part of that because I want them managing their stress as well. And then it is it's but I am big on understanding their what I call their light hygiene and understanding like what are you like how are you getting sunlight or at least daylight first thing in the morning within a half an hour of you getting up? Are you getting out for light breaks during the day if you live somewhere where you can access the sun? Evening time, are you using filters on your phone and not just buying warm lights, because the lighting industry is now realizing that circadian lighting is becoming a thing. But what they're doing is they're changing the tone of the color without removing the blue. So it looks like a nice warm light and looks like that must be good for me, but they haven't removed the blue. And what we need to do with the blue is for anyone who's replacing lighting in your bedroom at nighttime, it needs to have less than 2% blue light. Anything above that is likely to suppress the melatonin. So it's so the body drinks in the light that's been thirsty for this for a long time. And because the body hasn't had access to light, and because of our lifestyle and our stress and food and all the rest of it, we're not starting usually from a healthy place. So we would usually suggest that you're, as well as doing all the other stuff, getting out, managing your light at home at night, that you're giving yourself 3 months worth of light treatment. We want to catch those, follicles early on. And then like it's for me, it's fascinating. I see a lot of women for what we know what's known as RIF, like recurring implantation. And I don't like the word failure, but that's what.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're looking at and there was a recent study came out looking at what is going on with implantation, and I had looked at this a couple of months ago, and I was like, it is. So another aspect to what the light is doing is it's helping the embryo and the uterus talk to each other, because that window of implantation only lasts a couple of days. And what we're seeing now is there's this receptivity window. So if everything doesn't line up, if like so women who have with PCOS, they sometimes they're more likely to have a window that's off. So the embryo is coming down, and what the light does, it helps them have this conversation, and the uterus starts to have these little, what I call little landing pads. The penopods start to develop, which the light all helps with and reduces inflammation. And we have the embryo kind of rolling down into finding the perfect spot to implant. And then these penopods then start to kind of, they pull in fluid from the uterine cavity to kind of start bringing that embryo into the uterine lining. But the timing is so important. So now we're seeing, like, I love that, when I have women that will come back and they've had 2 IVFs that everything looked perfect. Even the lining looked good. And they're like, but it didn't stick, So it's like, okay, but this new study that was looking at more how the uterine lining and how the embryo are exchanging these packets of information, and we know that the light is, when we look at what's going on, what does it take for implantation to happen, that the light can have an impact in every single area of that implantation, and that getting that window kind of more aligned, so we see less challenges with implantation. And then you see these ultrasound with these lovely juicy lining, where before they had problems, and it's because it increases that microcirculation in the area. So, and just to go completely off topic, I'm looking at for women who've had cesarean births. We see that these women can sometimes develop a niche, which is kind of little pockets within around the scar, so that again we see more fertility challenges because the embryo is looking for a place to land, and sometimes it'll land in an area that is, close to the cervix, which is really what we don't want. And how the scar formation after a cesarean, it's dysregulated, but we can get the light on it and help regulate that scar formation so that we see less issues with the placenta in the next pregnancy. So
Mm.
so much here that
That's very
we
interesting.
haven't even scraped the surface. Then we
I'm
can talk about
sure.
preeclampsia and everything else. It's 10 years time. Watch this space. We'll be using light for a
Oh,
lot more than we are today.
hopefully, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I'd like to touch base with you. So the study that you mentioned, and I read the article on your blog regarding implantation and doing red light therapy pre-IVF transfer. I didn't read the full study, so I'm not sure. Was it a one session or were there multiple sessions leading up to the day of transfer? And was the light therapy used after transfer significantly? Or could you give me a little details on the study a bit?
So one of the studies looked at endometrial receptivity, but what they did was and what I've found kind of over the years, and big shout out to Lorne Brown. I know you're familiar with Lorne and Ruth
No.
Vipers in the UK, and Anne-Marie Jensen, of course, who have kind of been leading the way. What I found is in that study looking at the endometrial receptivity, they were looking at it a month before the IVF.
Okay.
So and it was, I think it was only a couple of sessions. I have to pull out the study again. But I was like, why are you doing it the month before? If they did
Mm.
have good success rates, but I thought, okay, so, and what I like to do is okay, let's find other areas that they've translated the research into. It might not have been a fertility, but is there other ways that we can use the laser that might just kind of increase those odds even more?
Mm.
So, like you do with the giga laser as well, like I'd like to start before we go near starting IVF. I would like to start. Let's go 3 months, backtrack three
Yeah.
months, 3 months out to give ourselves a chance of really, as I say, like bringing the body back into balance, getting the light on the entire reproductive system. We do the endometrial area, we on the uterus, the ovaries. I also work on the sacrum, the hip bones and shins for stem cells, which was I think is again, like we see in fertility treatments, women being suggested that as an add-on they do stem cell therapy. I'm like, well, why wouldn't we use our own stem cells? And it's less invasive. So, and I do the Oshiro as well.
Right.
Um,
The neck,
yes,
Oshiro, the neck therapy.
the
Yes.
neck and the back of the neck as well. So, for me, I was like, okay, doing it once before, a couple of times the month before didn't make sense. So, as much as possible, I will see women like in the 3 months ahead of time, where we're doing the follicular stage, and we're focusing on endometrium, and we're kind of getting to that point where the body is now, I think, in a state of much better health, assuming they're doing all the other things as well.
Right.
That's
Yes.
the because I think sometimes people just think I just do the laser and that's a silver bullet
Yeah.
and we're done. And I think for some women it can be if they don't have a lot of other things going on. But I think if you have a diagnosis, if you have, this is a more complicated picture, then I think, yeah, it's not going to be a silver bullet. You still have to, there's still a little bit of work to do.
You have
Yeah.
to do the work, right? You have to
Yeah.
do the
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like you said, it could be if they are doing the work, it could be that magic bullet that puts them over the edge into success.
Yeah. And that's, I
Yeah.
mean, for me, it's like, it's the evidence is just, and even though the fertility evidence is still growing, the evidence in other aspects of PBM, we've got, I think, close to 8,000 studies and most of them are laser studies, but we've got significant amount of research that has been happening. Brazil, and India is starting to catch up now as well. But Brazil are kind of top of the league when it comes to research
Okay.
on PBM. When I went to the PBM 2024 conference, and it was such a brilliant conference because it was um, because sometimes you go to conferences and you just listen to people trying to sell their stuff. So this was a conference where, of course, you had an exhibitor hall, but you also had it was like 3 days of nonstop researchers presenting their data. So, and I would say like 99% of these researchers have no skin in the game, no dog in the race. They just want to get this information out. So I really wanted to talk to the researchers that were working with pregnant women.
Hmm.
And because there's a lot of, do we stop? You
Safety
know,
concerns. Yes,
and
yes.
the Brazilians are like, use it. We're using it and we're seeing no issues. I
Hmm.
talked to Michael Hamlin about this, and I said, "What are your thoughts?" And again, like we're in agreement with there are so many ways that we can use for even for helping like help babies that are born with hypoxia, and like we can get light on the brain. They have this little soft spot here, so it's really easy. But when I was talking to some of the researchers in the Brazilian researchers, and they were having really great success with using PBM around the face for women who had lost their sense of smell during COVID and it had not returned.
Hmm.
So for me, I could think, okay, it sounds kind of annoying, but I'm like, is it really a big deal? You can't smell. No, it is. But for me, the midwife in me was thinking, oh, if these women cannot smell their newborn baby,
Hmm.
and because there's that whole olfactory system and bonding with your baby. I thought, but the
It
Brazilians like,
activates oxytocin, right? That stimulates oxytocin release.
yeah, we're supposed to breathe in our babies.
Yeah.
Their heads, there's certain smells that our brain will recognize and will want to care give our baby. So for me, that was that point. I was like, oh yeah, but I do love the Brazilians are out there doing really mega work using LEDs in labor as well and showing and Iran as well, shortening labor, less painful labors as well. So here's another alternative to medication, and it works better than heat therapy in labor. So better than the hot shower.
Wow. So yeah, I think you're right. You touched on an interesting point, how in this country, in the United States, we tend to traditional, by the book medicine is a little cautious, a little apprehensive about doing anything outside the box, anything really intricate and new for, fear of, litigation, fear of being sued if something goes wrong. And just it's a mindset, unfortunately, many doctors here just have a very narrow they do things the way they've always been done, and there's no changes in
That's it.
protocol. And it's unfortunate, but now I think we're seeing a bit of a revolution in thought now with the whole rise of the biohacking community is
Yeah.
really vocal and getting some policies changed and opening and expanding people's awareness of what is really out there and what is very helpful. So
Yeah.
yeah, that sounded like a wonderful conference. I hope they have another one. I would
They
attend that.
they run it every 2 years. I'm not. I think this year was supposed. There was talk about being in Korea this year, so I'm not sure if I think they're still debating where. But it was phenomenal, and there was like, and I wish they had it online or record so because there's like you can pick which section you want to go to. So one of the tracks that I went to was on microbiology,
Hmm.
and I went to a fascinating presentation on the use of blue light for making cells. We have a huge problem with antibiotic resistance.
Hmm.
So they found by using pulse blue light, I think it was 415. Now this is in vitro. This is on a plate, but they could make cells become less antibiotic resistant with 30 seconds of blue light. So the cells were starting to would take on the antibiotics, whereas before, like things like MRSA or I think they call it MRSA here,
Hmm.
C. diff. They are looking at, I think last year they were starting some studies on strep, group B strep or streptococcus, and group B strep would be something that pregnant women would be interested in. But like it's just incredible, and
Yeah. The
what
applications are endless. It really is.
yeah,
Yeah.
like blue light, we're seeing blue light. Of course, blue light under at nighttime is not good, but blue light as an antimicrobial.
Right.
I use I'm a big fan of this little device here, the fringe wand. So this is there is a for menopausal women and for
Mhm.
anyone who's women who have neuropathy as well. And I don't know if you can see it. So this is, does this look blue to you, or does this look?
Well, it looks purple from our
Yeah,
my
that's like the
screen.
purple.
Yeah.
But the blue light for yeast infections, BV, UTIs.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we talked to a lot of menopausal women about, because the estrogen loss then causes all kinds of, excuse me, issues in vaginal atrophy and pain, and again,
Right.
some women don't.
Pelvic floor issues.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just there's again so many ways that we can use these tools for just again
Now,
women's.
does that tool also help with egg quality? So if you use it on the red light, the red setting.
So I have about 3 or 4 months ago, I started working with, because I was kind of going back and forth about, okay, I have clients come in and they have their class 4 laser, and I know they're getting a significant amount of joules that
Hmm.
we're well, not that joules that we're delivering, but what's actually getting to the ovaries, of course, is a
Right.
whole other ball game,
That's the challenge is getting it to the ovary.
Exactly. So for this, I thought, okay, now it's not, it's still within that therapeutic window kind of wavelength. And I thought, okay, so if you look at um, women who are going through fertility treatments, they're having an ultrasound, usually a transvaginal
That's vaginal
ultrasound.
ultrasound. Yeah.
So we know that the waves can reach the
Mhm.
the ovaries, because we can visualize, the follicles. But what I found with this now is, and I have a couple of women that I'm working with that are using it, and because part of what I do when I'm not doing all the rest of the other stuff is I write protocols for women based on, they'll complete a big long take you 3 day health history form,
Mhm.
and I'll suggest kind of some of the tools that they can use. This and then because I like the idea of stacking devices
Yes.
whenever possible. So,
Yeah.
and I know like I'm sure you agree, I want everyone to have access to the tools, but not everybody, there's not enough giga lasers in the US. There's
Yeah.
not enough people who
Yes.
actually understand fertility, who can use a laser really well and understand. Now, we were joking about you need to understand what ovulation is at a minimum, and yeah, there's lots I could say on that about folks out there that are kind of jumping on the fertility bandwagon,
Yeah.
and seeing that there's an opportunity there, but please think it through. Go get
Yeah.
yourself some training, and because this is not just about getting pregnant and having a baby. Fertility challenges, they mess with your mind and your relationships, and it's not a case of just shine a light on it and cure somebody. They oftentimes, and I spend quite probably half of the time when I'm treating somebody, when I'm using the laser, we're it's almost like a counseling session as well about how they're doing, and
Oh,
how are they, like, what's stressing them out. Like, everyone's just gone through the holidays and
yeah.
Christmas and dealing with all the heartache that brings when you go to family gatherings, and people are going to be asking you. So if you're out there and you're thinking of getting involved in laser therapy for fertility, please, women deserve good care,
Yes.
and it
Yeah.
behooves you to please go and get some training, learn about not just the mechanics of fertility and the biology of fertility, but how it affects women's mental health as well.
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah, the mental health aspect is such there's a gap of availability there. And like you said, it's not just a matter of having the right tool for the job, but coaching someone through it and being there for them. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the hard part. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's holistic care. We want women to have a, wraparound care, not
Yeah,
just come and have your laser.
right, right. So you did bring up an interesting point I'd like for you to expand on. So you were talking about the different devices and how many of the studies were based on laser, but we see on the market LED. And so could you just
Yeah.
briefly give us a difference between laser and LED and which is the one that people should be really looking for?
I mean, when it comes to fertility, we're targeting specific areas. So we're targeting the ovaries and we're targeting the uterus. And for egg quality, we're trying to get through a couple of layers of tissue and fascia and blood and muscle. So an LED is, I think of LEDs as like your kind of sprinkler system. So we're getting nice kind of the area has been bathed in light, but how deep it's penetrating and how much energy is actually reaching the eggs is quite different.
Right.
So with the LED devices, and I think again for somebody who's they're relatively healthy, they haven't got a diagnosis, and it's just taken them a little while. Jump starting, the batteries, everything with an LED panel or an LED. Well, not so much panels because so much of the light just bounces off the body. But an LED, when it's on the skin, because any gap we have between the light and the body, it's just we lose significant amount of power. And I think it's estimated that it's less than 5%, even with lasers, is actually reaching like deep into the tissues.
Mm,
We do know that we've got mitochondria all over the body and in the blood, and they'll take it and travel with it. But when you're dealing with like significant egg quality due to age, um, or there's something that's been, I've worked with a couple of women who've had issues with I always get this right, the zona, it's the outer casing
mm,
of the follicle and when they try or of the embryo, when they try to do testing, it just disintegrates.
mm.
So when we're looking at egg quality and LEDs, if you've got really it's just taking longer and you're fairly fit, well, you might get by with LEDs, but you've got to be consistent. So I'm saying like you're using your LEDs for again 3 months. Generally, we stop after ovulation. I work with quite a number of women who continue on after ovulation just for a couple of days because the window of implantation is still a few days out, and they want to optimize their chances. But
Mm.
again, like we have to be really careful about understanding where are we putting the laser. We're never putting the laser over the uterus if we consider, of the reproductive organs, if we consider that a pregnancy could be possible. But there's other areas we'll use. So I'll still do Oshiro, I'll still do the lower back as well, and
Okay.
lymphatics as well all the time.
Mm,
But laser is it's like a hose, so we're getting targeted light,
mm,
we're getting and it's monochromatic. So that means, and columnated. So monochromatic means that if I'm using 830 nanometer, it is 830. With an LED, it is 830. Even though it says 830, it probably has a little bit of 820, maybe 810. It probably has a little bit of 850.
mm,
So it's not that kind of, and we say columnated as in they're all going in the same direction. But with LED, it's much more diffuse.
mm.
And even someone's skin tone will impact how much light they absorb. So is it getting into the skin, or someone who's quite melanated, is it getting absorbed at skin level? And different wavelengths can mitigate that, like 980 and 1060s bypass melanin. And get deeper into the tissues. My 1064 I use with women, and especially for anyone who's coming in for again deep tissue issues. But up until recently, it wasn't, we couldn't find lasers that had the power and safety profile as well, so that they can be used safely. Because, and I have uh, quite the collection. I'm looking at my stack here, quite a collection of, as you probably have, of different
Oh,
devices that
I have a
you,
closet filled with devices I've tried out. Yes.
yes, yeah. So it's okay. What can we do with all of these devices? And
Right.
there's
Right.
and then you look out on Amazon and
That's
it's
what I
just
was going to say. Just going onto Amazon and buying a $50 LED light pad isn't really the solution that's going to be helpful. Slightly, maybe a little bit, again, depending on the wattage, depending on the strength of it, and
yeah,
proximity, how close it is. But even then, it just doesn't have enough power. That's
yeah,
that's what I find. It's just not powerful enough. So,
yeah.
yeah, but it's a
Because
marketing
we're
tool.
trying to get as much output because we know the body's only absorbing a tiny little bit.
Right.
So if you're using a pad that's like low milliwatts, it's like it's it'll be you'll have a lovely glowing abdomen,
It's a
and
it's a fancy Christmas light. That's what I tell
yeah,
some of my
it
patients.
is. And
They
it's
buy one for $50 and on Amazon, and I tell them like, well, it may or may not be doing what you think it's doing.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So and even some of the devices that you can get are there's a device that is I think it will probably it's been touted as a fertility device. I won't mention the brand. But I've looked at it and I've again I'm like kind of disappointed in the approach of some of these
mm,
device manufacturers that and companies that are they're telling women, if you have endometriosis, this device is going to cure you.
mm,
Or yeah, the endometriosis, because that's now quite the buzzword now. Everyone is trying to figure out how to fix endometriosis. And anything like that, that's chronic inflammation. We can do a lot with the light, but it has to be decent power light for pain management. But when it comes to resolving, like we are modulating the entire immune system, and like it's not, it's going to be a couple of months, if not longer, worth of work. But the device itself, when I've looked at the device and looked at the specs and everything, it is as powerful as a supermarket scanner.
that's unethical. That's terrible.
And yeah, and I agree. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So
And, but it's a
it's
lot of buyer beware. That's the thing in
this
this
is it.
country is buyer beware. And for
Yeah.
those who haven't done their homework, unfortunately, they succumb to the marketing, without doing their research.
Yeah, yeah, it is. You got to do your due diligence, and I know
Yeah,
it is complicated stuff when you start learning about red light therapy, and that's why one
yeah.
of the reasons I wrote the book. I was like, okay, can I?
Mm.
I actually I want to update it already. I was like, thank you. It's like, how can we make this like really easy to understand? Because the physics behind it, and it's we're helping these molecules jump from one. And I was like, oh, this is just, it's a
Yeah,
lot.
it's a lot.
But yeah, we're talking about stacking devices. So I do like this is the fringe wand because
Mm,
we can get really close again, to the ovaries. We only have a small bit of tissue that pouch of Douglas that is kind of behind the kind of between the uterus and the fallopian tube or the ovaries. It's not very far to get that light, and because it has the near infrared, it's the only one that does. So I
wow.
think other ones that have red light, I think it will definitely help with circulation. But if we can get the near infrared as close to those ovaries as possible. Now, is it doing much for endometrial receptivity? I'm not that far with it yet. I'm focusing on egg quality now, but
Mm.
I'm expecting to see some results soon. But I stack it with, so I have a 3B laser that I use. It's a near infrared and red light as well. But it's one is I think it's the most powerful kind of home laser you can get at the moment. It's 1.3 watts.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
So it is, and then so I write the protocol then. So if somebody's using this, it's kind of our brand laser, Solasta. If they're using my laser, I write the protocol for them, and but I expect them to come back to me in 3 months and tell me either you're pregnant or we've seen significant changes in your biomarkers. If not, then let's change the protocol and let's, increase the dosage, or let's, because we're always looking to use a dosage that is, the minimum to get that stimulation, to get the body to start activating. But then maybe we have to go up in power. Maybe we have to spend longer on the ovaries, or use the wand more often. So we're kind of tweaking as we go. But at
So you
least
stack those two. You use that handheld plus the wand.
yeah, and
That's
then
great.
depending on who's coming, if they're coming into my clinic and if they're going to be going on vacation or whatever, and it's going to mess with it, they'll get the wand or they'll get the laser and they'll continue treating themselves between sessions, which
Mm,
makes it a little bit more affordable as well.
right.
Because fertility treatments themselves are not cheap,
Yes. Yeah,
and then
unfortunately. Yeah.
everybody wants to sell them 2 million supplements and all kinds of non-evidence based tools
Mhm.
that, but
Mhm.
I know from my own experience that when you're struggling to conceive, that you kind of hang your hope on whatever the next thing is, and you hope that will make a difference. And I think that's probably
Yeah.
why I think unfortunately so many women are just buying devices. They're being tricked really into buying devices that aren't going to help them really for
Right.
what they're hoping for.
Right. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think between yourself, your podcasts, and my book, and your upcoming new book,
Yes. Yes. My soon to be released book, the title to be determined.
we have an obligation, I think, to get that information out there in ways that it's easy to understand and it's accessible, and I think we're seeing the cost of devices come down as well, and I think consumers are they're asking more questions.
Yes. Yeah.
They
Yeah, I
really
think
are.
consumers are educating themselves, becoming much more involved in the process, which is good because an
Yeah.
educated consumer is a good consumer because
Oh, yeah.
they know, the more they know, the more they can discern what's a good product and what's a sub-quality product. So,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a pity that unfortunately, like I sometimes women will contact me and they've bought a device and they just want me to help write a protocol for them with how to use the device. And I'm like, when they send me the specs of the device, and I'm like, oh, this is, and sometimes they've spent like significant amount of money on these devices that
right.
are, yeah, not gonna be helpful. I mean, I've tried to, you know, find the find some glimmer of hope of ways that they can use it
Yeah.
for other things. But I don't want them to feel like, okay, you already spent, you bought a panel that cost you like $1,000 or more, and now I'm about to tell you that's not going to do
Yeah.
it for you. And
Not
it's,
gonna help. Yeah.
that if you can get your hands on a laser, I mean, professional laser, absolutely, if you can, and if you can't, that yeah, stacking a few devices might just be enough to kind of nudge you over the edge.
So the product you just showed, the handheld 3B laser, what's the name of that?
So it's Solasta. So the
Solasta.
Solasta. So that's actually the name of my clinic as well.
Oh,
It's a play on an Irish word, solace, for light.
oh,
So yeah, it and again, I mean the little laser is great for because I when I'm working with my fertility clients, I'm like, if you buy a good device, you're going to use it for like it's going to be a big part of your first aid kit.
hmm,
When I was like, when you are pregnant, you'll be able to use it for carpal tunnel, for lower back pain. You'll be able to use it for the things that nobody wants to talk about in pregnancy, vulvar
hmm.
varicosities, and And then after your baby's here, you'll use it for any breastfeeding tenderness. You'll use it for any perineal injury. If you have a cesarean, there's some lovely
Yeah.
studies on wound healing. We don't need huge amounts of power
Right.
either. So it's there's just you'll it's a tool that you'll have for life. And when your toddler is going around whacking their heads off doors and things, little bit of light will
Little
go a
light
long
helps
way.
everything. Yep. Yep. That's
Yeah.
great. That's wonderful. Oh, this has been wonderful. Well, Tracy, thank you. Any last words that you'd like to say to everybody? I'm going to put a link on our page to your devices so people could read up more on them. I'm sure the wand, a lot of people could be fascinated by the wand and the home laser that you have, the Solasta. I would love to see that. So we'll provide a link on the page here that everybody can get to those products and read more about them. But do you have anything else? Any last words to share?
I think my biggest health hack for 2026 is get outside.
I
Get
agree.
into nature, get out as often as you can. We can get and even if you do have little ones at home, you can be out in the woods and you're getting the green leaves, they all reflect that lovely near infrared. You don't have to be out baking yourself in the sun, but get some sunlight. Get and change your lighting in your home to circadian lighting so that you're keeping your melatonin nice and healthy levels
Mhm.
for everything that's going on in your body.
That's wonderful advice. I certainly hope everybody will take that advice. I know I will. Need to get out in the sun and walk and just be in the fresh air, in the
Yep.
trees. Absolutely, very important for health. Tracy, so thank you so much. This was wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here, and we will hopefully we'll have another conversation. And I hope to see you at the next conference. I'm going to try and go wherever it may be. So.
It is such a great conference, and it's for anyone interested in light therapy, and the amount of research is just mind-boggling. But for anyone who's out there interested in kind of what the up and coming research, keep an eye on Brazil. They're doing
Oh,
some really, really amazing stuff down there.
no, that's fantastic. Great. Well, thank you, Tracy, so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Jim. It
All
was
right.
great to talk to you.
Thank you. Nice. Thank you.